Welcome everybody. My name is Mike Thomas and I'm the Everyday Consciousness Coach. And what I do is I help people to understand their nervous systems and how that improves your ability to map out what your human experience is. Whether it's your fitness, your wellness in terms of addressing anxiety that may come up, or digestive issues, or even relationships. So Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Greatness, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." So what I'd like you to do right now is notice, what are your habits in your everyday experience? Like right now, what's your breathing doing? Is it going in and out of your nose? Is your mouth involved? Notice any movement in the chest. You may even put a hand on your chest and on your belly. Or is it naturally moving? What are the sights that you're taking in right now? Colors, textures, distances, shapes. The sounds, my voice, your breathing perhaps, the music outside. Tastes on your tongue. Is your tongue salivating? Or is it dry or somewhere in between? What are some of the odors that you're noticing right now? How about your skin? Feeling the air on your skin. Your clothing on your skin. These are all things that you might notice if you pay close attention, right? But it's not something we focus on necessarily throughout our day. We have other things like, what am I going to eat for lunch today? Man, I said this thing to somebody I just met the other day, and I think I made an ass of myself. Like there are all these things going through our heads, and often we're out of our bodies, and we're not here in the present moment. And what that does is it shifts the mode of our nervous system. And why this is important is because what's going on in every moment is mostly unconscious. What I mean by that is what you just focused on with your senses. As measured by the system with NLP, every second you take in 126 bits of information. I know, random number. But why that's important is because unconsciously, what you're taking in through your senses comes in at 2 million bits per second. That's so much more. There's this process in our nervous system called neuroception. And what that is we're scanning the environment constantly, unconsciously, with our autonomic nervous system, the part that controls breathing, heart rate, digestion, all the things that are automatic. And what it scans in the environment shifts what we're going to do with our nervous system. So if you're in a space of relaxation, if you're in a space of safety, you'll be able to think clearly. You'll be able to be more in touch with your sensations, your emotions. Emotional intelligence is higher. Social capacities and connecting with other people and recognizing where they are and trying to put yourself in their shoes. These are all things that you can do more easily when you're in what's called the safety mode of the ventral vagal parasympathetic nervous system. Don't worry about the jargon. In school, we're taught that there are two branches of the autonomic nervous system. There's that rest and digest parasympathetic, and there's that fight or flight, where we're in emergency mode. Right. And it turns out that there is a third branch. And these are ordered in terms of how important they are based on how much our nervous system perceives in our environment. That word I mentioned, neuroception, it perceives through the nervous system, neurocepts, safety, danger, or life threat. Now, here's why that's really important, because, how often are you gonna have a bear chase you or somebody pull a gun on you? Okay, that's probably not gonna happen very often. But what happens when this part of the nervous system is active? This is where it gets very interesting, or in the danger, fight-flight response. So before we get there are a couple layers of what's referred to as memory, but it's really how we perceive the world. Okay, so when you see a cat, what are some of the thoughts that come up? Cute, cuddly, it's gonna scratch me, I'm allergic. I'm using words to describe the experience. That's part of that 126 bits consciously that we take in that moment of perceiving the cat, right? Let's say you were allergic to a cat and in your childhood and it scratched you. Immediately you see a cat and you're like, okay. And it's a different experience. You might use different words other than cuddly or sweet, cute, right? I'd be like, oh, get it away from me, right? So the emotional experience that we can be aware of either, oh, that's a cute cat, or get it away from me, I don't want it to scratch me, and I don't want allergies, right? That's all what we notice on the surface. But what's going on under the surface? Below the surface of the tip of the iceberg, as they say. In any given moment when we perceive something is in our body. So what's your body language doing right now? Notice your gestures, facial expressions, posture. Yeah, you notice cross your arms, right? Yeah, so what is that saying on an implicit level below the iceberg about what's going on in your nervous system? This is where we start to map out what's going on in our human experience, and we can start to have more choice around how we shift our body state. So there's the emotional experience through gestures and postures, but even deeper in implicit memory, that is how we perceive things. By the way, when I'm saying memory, I mean when neurons fire, forgive the jargon, I'm being as plain as I can, in a pattern that they fired in the past. I see a cat now, and cats in my childhood scratched me and I'm allergic. Immediately, my body responded. It perceived the environment, and I have the words on the tip of the iceberg of, it's a cat, I don't like cats, right? I happen to be allergic. I do like cats, but it's a complicated relationship between us. But underneath, my body is doing something underneath my conscious awareness. Just like right now, your body's doing something underneath your conscious awareness. And we can glean a little bit of what's going on in there based on what we feel. And there's another benefit to that. When you're focused on what's in your head, what you can think about, what you can put words to, it actually raises the stress response. When you focus on the present moment, in your body, in your sensations, here, now, it lowers the stress response. It actually changes the brain circuits that are active. So, we've established that most of what we experience is unconscious, right? And that most of our perception happens with our nervous system in our environment, and it shifts what's going on inside. Let's get a little bit more specific. Excuse me. So these are those branches of the nervous system again. I like using these colors because it's like a stoplight, right? So when we're in safety, we can socially engage. We can notice what's going on in our environment, and we can be relaxed, and we can be creative. We can be spontaneous. When our nervous system perceives something that cues to our body that we're in danger, it brings up a whole cluster of symptoms that you might refer to as chaotic. Anxiety is an example. Hyperactivity. Who here's dealt with or knows somebody who has ADHD? Yeah. Anger. Getting a sense of, I gotta go, I can't be here. I don't like the situation. But it's movement oriented. And so what happens when this branch gets active is we need to either fight or flee, and that's that fight-flight response that we heard in school, right? But here's where it gets interesting. When stress levels go higher, and again, we're talking about unconsciously, our bodies are responding to our environment, it goes into an immobilization response. What's more of the rigidity category. So depression falls into that category. Being spaced out. You can't quite get in touch with your feelings or your emotions. And if somebody asks you, what are you feeling right now? Can you put a word to it? Anyone call out? What's an emotion you're feeling right now?
Annoyance because you gave cats a bad rap.
That's just my personal experience.
Is what your immobilization the same as freeze?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, using the example of a cat, sometimes they'll notice something in their environment and they'll do that cat stance, or they might even arch their back, right? The experience up here is what happens in trauma, when our body shuts down. And so when the body learns to do that in a particular situation, it'll repeat that anytime there's a cue in the environment, something that we sense, not necessarily consciously, like the cat in that experience. And of course it can be a positive experience, a more cuddly, loving cat, right? It depends on what your association is, right? So let's back up a little bit. How do our automatic responses show up in our lives? It actually starts in infancy. Anyone here heard of attachment theory? Yeah? Okay, cool. So it was a behavioral theory some 50, 60 years ago, and it's evolved into a regulation theory. And why that's important is because the way we develop through that body language exchange with our caregivers in infancy sets the patterns of what we perceive as safe, dangerous, or life threat. And it's unconscious. So how many people here have tried public speaking? Yeah. It's not that I'm not nervous, it's that I am being with that experience. And that's an automatic experience that came from trying to say what I wanted to say that was authentic in the moment to my parents, through no fault of their own. They maybe dismissed me or like, that's not what we're doing right now. And I felt like, oh man, that's not okay to say what I'm saying. And so that cue of someone watching me as I'm saying what I want to say, for example, could show up as a chaos response. I'm feeling fidgety, I'm feeling anxious, right? And so what we need in order to develop healthy, appropriate cues in our nervous system is what's called secure attachment. And lucky for all of us, we can develop what's called earned adult secure attachment. That is, we can shift our nervous system responses. How are we doing with that? I thought you were looking.
No. You have 12 minutes and 28 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, great. So, secure attachment is based on the experience of our nervous system being regulated. That is, you're comfortable, creative, empathetic, you're your best self. Hence the title of this talk, Reaching Your Human Potential. I wanted to call it optimizing because it's a process. There's always improvement that can be made in being in the experience. Of course, is what lowers our stress load, as I mentioned earlier, right? So, what do we need in order for secure attachment to happen? We need safety. And why this is important is because what you perceive in your environment right now and every moment in your life is based on this experience. So you need a caregiver who's emotionally attuned, who's emotionally available, and constantly available. And there are various ways of saying that. But the point being that when an infant cries out, and mother or father, whoever is there as the caregiver, responds to what's going on. Secure attachment, luckily, doesn't have to be perfect. It only needs to be 30% of the time. The other 70%, where we make mistakes, like all human beings do, is remedied through repair. So if I say something to my son and I was a little short with him, I have to go back and apologize later. That repairs that. And in his nervous system, he is ingraining these automatic patterns, these automatic habits of flexibility, of recognizing that it's okay, consciously, but also his body is going to respond differently. So, how many people have thought of different symptoms that show up in your daily life as I've been talking? Anxiety, depression, digestive issues, tension, high or low energy, weight loss or gain. These are all things that happen as a result of the mode of our nervous system. Well, ultimately, what we can do is we can shift our attention as best we can and create habits. So, as I mentioned, Aristotle said at one point, we are what we repeatedly do. Greatness, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. So, what are your habits, consciously? But also, what are the unconscious habits? Everything that's below the surface, below in the iceberg that we can't see. So, the majority of what's going on has to do with our social interactions. Sue Johnson, attachment researcher, described the experience of the power in our nervous system in personal growth and everyday experiences versus when we are connected with an attachment figure. That is someone who we have an attachment bond with. As children, that's our parents, or whoever our caregivers were. But as adults, that's whoever our intimate relationships are with. So that could be a really close friend, but if you have an intimate relationship with somebody, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, right? That is going to reflect the experiences that you had early on. So going back to Sue Johnson, she said that the power of our nervous system experience when we're not in an attachment experience, you could compare it to a 20-watt flashlight. Point that flashlight around. Where's your flashlight of attention right now? Where are you focusing? But the experience with an attachment figure is comparable to the floodlights of a stadium. They're not even close. Not really even comparable. It's several million bits per second versus 126, right? So relationships are the biggie. And it's not just relationships with other people, it's also a relationship with ourselves. And that's where, if you want to stay for the workshop that I'm doing at 2 o'clock, I'll go into a lot of the different practices that you can do to attune to your nervous system and shift the mode when you need to. Anyone have any questions about this experience? Yeah.
It's not a question, but if I may add that as a parent of a child with early trauma from parent by adoption, I had to learn all about the vagus nerve and what things soothe it and what things amp it up, and also that trauma short circuits the thinking brain, right, and it causes one to repeat, because constantly when any stimulus of feeling unsafe appears, you go to that red state, or you start to go up to that red state. So trauma short circuits its ability to rationally process and assess the situation. Am I really under threat?
Yes. So that's a perfect segue. So I've talked about all of the potential issues that we can have that can go wrong, Mike. But what can we do to improve our experience? So relationships are a big part of that. But first we need to become aware enough so that we can attune to the people that we're engaging with. All right? So take a moment right now and notice your body. What do you feel? Maybe in your chair, are you leaning more to the left or more to the right? Let's take a couple deep breaths and just notice the experience of the air flowing in and flowing out. Breathing in and out at whatever pace is comfortable. I want you to start to count to yourself how long your inhale takes. 1, 2, 3, however long. And then how many seconds is the exhale? Try a couple more breaths and see if it's the same number. Maybe it starts to shift. Everyone have an approximate number? In versus out? Who had the inhale longer? Okay, whose exhale is longer? Yeah, okay. So there are more relaxed nervous systems in this room. So your inhale stimulates a part of your heart that increases your heart rate. And it increases your blood pressure. It just generally excites the body. Whenever you exhale, it calms it. So there's this concept beyond heart rate. It's called heart rate variability. Every time you're inhaling, your heart rate's speeding up. Every time you're exhaling, it's slowing down. So that variability between how fast or how slow it goes is actually one of the best measurements for how regulated your nervous system is. If you're too upregulated and you need to calm down, lengthen your exhale. Has anyone here tried box breathing? Ready? Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4 again before you repeat. And that's even between the inhale and the exhale. But you can change that up if you need to. So you can make your inhale longer and deeper and into your upper lungs if you need to wake up. So, or maybe even slower. Lifting your chest, expanding your ribs, expanding your belly, and then just quickly exhale. This is stimulating, and you'll find if you do this a couple times that you'll be more awake, more aware, more attuned to what's going on. Now, if you're already excited, don't do that. What it's going to do is it's going to put you into too high of a stress load. So, if you're already excited, if you're already high in terms of the amount of stimulation your nervous system has, so if you have any of those chaotic symptoms, where was the right chart here? Hyperactivity, nervousness, anxiety, just feel like you want to move. Or if you're feeling pretty relaxed, chilled out, creative, spontaneous, playful, you're down here, and you probably don't need to use your breath to change what's going on. But if you're up here, if you're finding you're spacing out, you're having a hard time staying awake, if you're not as in touch with your feelings or your needs as you would like to be, then what you need to do is you need to start bringing your stress response down by waking it up. So interestingly enough, when you're up here, you don't want to be still. So this is where a trauma-informed approach is really important when you do any sort of breath work or work with shifting your state. Because if you're in an immobilization state and you try and calm yourself, you're stuck. You get stuck there, which is why in trauma-informed mindfulness, by the way, you don't want to ever tell someone to sit still, close their eyes. What it'll do if they have an implicit response from early on of high stress or trauma, they will go back into that state. And what you normally experience is not so dramatic. What you'll notice is that you can't focus on your meditation. Like, oh, I spaced out again. Oh, I drifted again. That's a dissociation response. So when that happens, you need to shift how you do things. So I unknowingly addressed that when I couldn't meditate very well by doing Tai Chi. Because it's mindful, it's relaxed, but there's movement involved. There's no signaling to the nervous system that I can't move and I'm not allowed to move. I'm enjoying the flow of the experience. I'm allowing myself to breathe naturally. And I'm just noticing what's going on in my sensations. So that's one example of something that you could do, even if you don't know Tai Chi. You could just move like you're flowing through water. We'll go through some of this in the workshop if anyone of you want to join. And what that does is it allows you to wake up, to go down into a mobilization space. And often that gets confused for, oh no, I made it worse. Because if you have discomfort, if you have anxiety that was beneath the surface, it'll be revealed here. You ever heard that saying, if you're going through hell, keep going? Yeah, that's what you want to be aware of here. If you're in a dissociated state, you're depressed or you're not able to focus, get yourself moving. Notice your breath is in whatever way is comfortable. And once you start to feel, then lengthen your exhales and start to move a little slower within comfort. Notice what your body's telling you. The body's constantly communicating with you and telling you what it needs. And so that's really what this is all about. It's learning to attune to what you need. And the more aware you are of what's going on inside yourself, the more capacity you have to see that in other people. Because when somebody displays body language of any type, what does this say about me? Or, how about this? Or this? That's that implicit memory that my body's expressing an emotion based on the response that it's in. And so what you're gonna pick up when you notice that in my body language is, oh yeah, I've been proud before. I felt sad or deflated before. I felt angry before. And you can feel into that experience. The more you can, it's not about avoiding these high stress states. It's about navigating them. Recognizing, oh, here's where I am. Here's where I am on the map. And here's what I can do to shift that. And so you cultivate this resilience. As I mentioned before, secure attachment functioning. That is your ability to connect to yourself and to others in a way that's flexible, aware, calm, safe, spontaneous, playful, curious, relaxed, fun. So, any questions at this point? Yes?
So besides Tai Chi, what else can help? And the breathing, what else can help, bring me down to the brain area?
That's
other things?
great question. So it's a multifaceted answer. It's about looking at, okay, so what can I do in each moment? What are my habits and how are they contributing to lowering my stress response? So one way you can do that is through breathing techniques like I mentioned. Another is through exercise. So there's this concept called limbic body therapy. Limbic brain is the part that processes our emotions. And limbic body therapy refers to getting your body moving in a way where you experience emotional safety. That's where the name came from. So just about every type of exercise, by the way, including singing, acting, dancing, yoga, Tai Chi, anything where you're choosing to move and breathe and be aware of your experience, you're building competence, mastery. You're getting better at something. What this does is it increases your resilience, your ability to bounce back from these experiences. And here's why. In a trauma response or chronic stress, whatever brings your stress load all the way up here, what you end up experiencing is a lack of competence, helplessness, a sense of being trapped. I can't do anything. And by the way, each one of these responses is adaptive. If you do get held up at gunpoint, please don't try and take the gun away. Freezing is an adaptive response. You're gonna probably survive if you don't try and take out the person who's holding a gun, right? Or, God forbid, there's a situation where there's a predator. Freezing is your best bet if you can't run away, because then another opportunity might present itself where you can get away. And actually, if you look at some of these nature documentaries where you see, for example, a cheetah chasing down an impala, if I can find the link, I'll provide that for you if you're interested. There's this cheetah that runs after this impala and catches it, but they slow down the frame right as the jaws of the cheetah are grabbing the neck. And what you notice is that the impala collapses before the cheetah grabs it. Why does it do this? This is adaptive. This allows it to not struggle and have its neck broken. What ends up happening is that as it's dragging this impala away, a hyena comes out of the brush and starts to challenge the cheetah for prey. And while they're fighting, the impala pops up, runs off. This is adaptive. Every one of these responses is good. It's helpful. It's just sometimes our nervous system perceives that we need to do those responses and it's not actually appropriate anymore. And that's where generating awareness is so important. So to answer your question a little further, there are a number of therapeutic processes that will help you lower your average stress load so that over time this becomes your norm. And they all involve something called neurogenic tremors. So you ever sit in class or at work or at home, you just notice that you're tapping your foot or tapping your pencil. Just notice maybe you had something really intense happen to you. Maybe you just had a car accident. You notice your hands are shaking. This is a natural response that the body has to dissipate the stress energy held in the tissues. And this is a lot of the work that I do with people one-on-one, is helping them to become aware, as Barbara knows well. There's a modality called TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises, where you slowly move through these different ways of connecting to your body and stimulate your psoas muscle to start tremoring, and do it in a way that's calm and soothing so that your body can communicate with itself and release that stored up tension in the tissues. So I would highly recommend finding a modality like that. Somatic experiencing is another one like that. Bioenergetics is another one like that. Like I said, TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises, that's one that I provide. So that would fall into the category of unconscious work, the neurogenic tremors. And something really cool happens in TRE, by the way. When you're shaking and tremoring like that, the body releases a ton of oxytocin. And this process is very similar to the process of a mother and an infant. And as they bond, they have this mutual release of oxytocin. It's this bonded, relaxed, comforting, loving experience. It's the epitome of this branch of the nervous system. And so when we can allow ourselves to do that, because our society generally teaches us, when you're shaking, stop, get it together. We generally stop ourselves from doing that. It's a socially conditioned response to not show vulnerability as if it's a weakness. And what these healing modalities do is it helps you to get in touch with that. And as I mentioned before, regulating your nervous system is most powerfully done in relationships with an attachment figure, but also a relationship with ourselves. So that's what TRE is. It's an opportunity to get more in touch. And the man who created TRE, David Berceli, he interviewed me at one point as a provider, asking what my experience was like. And this term came to me. I call it mindfulness on steroids, because the experience I had with TRE was that I gained the amount of awareness and calm capacity to notice what my body needs in a couple months, comparable to what I learned in about 10 years of practice in mindfulness by itself. It's connecting to the body that makes the biggest difference. As a matter of fact, there's a book out by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And you've heard of it?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's an amazing book, and it's about how the unconscious parts of us, our body, is basically a map of what our past experiences are and how we're going to respond to whatever's going on. And so unless you address the body level, for example, in trauma therapy, if you don't address the body, it's not going to change the root of the issue. What's going to end up happening if you try and deal with the cognitive aspects and shift your thinking is that your body is going to bring you right back into that stream of whatever it thinks it needs. Does it need to run away or fight? Does it need to shut down? Whatever it thinks it needs to do, it's going to do. It's an uphill battle. It's not something we can win fighting our bodies. So getting in touch with it, I like to compare it to the experience of surfing. If you just stand there and let the waves hit you, that's kind of like ignoring what your unconscious is telling you. When you get up on that surfboard and you learn to navigate surfing the waves, that's kind of like doing TRE or mindfulness. Improving your fitness capacity so you have more resilience, more capacity to handle a difficult, stressful situation. If your heart rate normally goes really high when you climb stairs, for example, but then you go through the fitness regime that helps you to have that be easy, your body is less stressed in the same situation. Same applies to social situations. If you feel anxiety, if you practice attuning to what's going on, and I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but Dr. Dan Siegel has amazing work on this. He says, name it to tame it. So if you're experiencing something and you want to process it, rather than fighting it or ignoring it, notice it. I'm feeling anxiety. Okay, let's go a step further though. That's a mental concept, anxiety, but what does the anxiety feel like? Do I have butterflies in my stomach? Do I have a sense of heaviness or warmth or cool in my chest? Do I feel a headache? Do I feel tension in my fists or shoulders? What's going on physiologically? And when you describe that, and also describe the emotions that go with that, what happens is your body is actually able to address it and process it more easily. So, thank you for that question. I could go on and on about this. Did that answer what you were asking? Okay, great. Thank you. Cool. It's time? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. And feel free to talk to me now as I'm unsetting up if you have any interest in some of my work. Thanks.
Give me a card.
They're in my car. I'm gonna grab them and I'm gonna bring them to the workshop.